Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Sit Around the Fire, a space where we have real, unfiltered conversations about mental health, personal growth, and what it actually takes to heal and show up fully in your life. I'm your host, Ashlea Dillard, a therapist, a hypnotherapist, and a former first responder. This podcast is here to help challenge the way that you think, help reconnect you with yourself, and remind you that transformation is always possible. I am really excited today to bring you a very special guest of mine who's literally joining us from across the globe. So welcome into this show, Miss Adrianne, and welcome.
Ashlea, thank you so much for welcoming me into what I consider a sacred space. I have so much respect for you, the work you did, and the work you're doing now. And I love your story. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. That's one of the things I treasure the most about the podcast is the storytelling. So I am excited to host you today and to bring you into the conversation. And let's just start off with, if the person listening to you today is diving in for some reason, because I don't believe in coincidences, so they're listening for some reason, is what do you want that person to walk away with today? What's the message you want to give them?
Well, I love the way that you say that. And for me, the message I hope that I can give is that it's not your fault. Now, out of context, that may not mean anything. And I think you can relate to this having dealt with PTSD. I was trained not to put the D on the end because it's not a disorder. We're dealing with what we had to deal with. So it took me a long time to realize I had PTSD after being a rape survivor and a sexual assault survivor. All the work that I do now with the mindfulness and that I learned through the yoga and the breath work and the affirmations and the journaling, all of this and the EFT and the tapping is to come back into my body because I had left my body. That was part of my PTSD reaction, having lost control of my body several times in a sexual context. So I would say that it's not your fault. So that would be the message. So whatever it is that you're struggling with, if it's being labeled as PTSD or what's wrong with you or you got problems or it's not your fault.
I love that. It has very much like a seed of forgiveness to that story, that message as well. Forgiveness for yourself.
Actually, I had to do that. I'm still working on that. Yes, because how did I get myself in that situation? It's your fault for being in that situation. How can it happen again? As I say, it happened more than one time. Or I know when it happened, something inappropriate, and I was prepubescent or maybe pubescent, and my parents were out of country, and my grandmother was with me. And when I told her what happened, and we told my mother said, "Don't tell your father because he'll kill him." So then you carry that guilt. Because then when it happens again, you don't tell anyone because what's going to happen? So, yeah, so forgiveness. I'm so glad you said that. It's not your fault and forgive yourself. Forgiving the other person, we're still working on that. But I do believe I want to get to that moment where I have fully forgiven anyone for whatever because it's for my sake and not theirs. I'm still petty in that way, Ashlea. I can still hold some things that I know I should get rid of, but no longer the guilt or the self-blame for that. And that did take a long time, years, decades even, seriously, before I could even talk about it. And years, don't want to exaggerate, but years, because this happened, teenager, like I say, prepubescent. So I don't think I was 40 before I could talk to my mother about what she didn't know about, and then longer before you forget. And I want to say it's this teeny, teeny, teeny part of me that still thinks I should have protected myself better. But that can go into another story where I went out of a window. So, because I said, okay, if you think you didn't protect yourself better before, you're going down, you're going to give it up your all. And that worked out. So I did take a long time thinking I didn't do everything. And then being in yet another situation and then knowing I did absolutely I could. I'm like, okay, I don't have to worry about that again. Things just can happen. This can be completely, and it's never like the movies. She said it wasn't some stranger snatches you or somebody and you think you're in a safe situation. So that takes forgiveness too, because you thought you let your calm, your guard down, you think. But maybe I think I learned to tune more into my instincts. Maybe there were signals I missed. Again, not blaming, but using it as an opportunity because sometimes we can be a little bit too relaxed and thinking, okay, so just maybe do another mental sweep around the room, so to speak, to see, okay, am I safe? Is everything? And then, you have to, trust trust.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you can speak to some of the nervous system impact on this. Like because I think our nervous system just depends on what people have gone through and what situations they've been in, but your nervous system is all about the safety and survival aspect of things and picking up those messages and trying to make sense of environments and put together a plan and all of this. Is what can you say to what you saw within yourself around the nervous system impact that you experienced, and then also how you worked with that so that you weren't in this constant state of feeling like you needed to jump out of a window, like in that
Yeah.
fight and flight state. So walk us through what that looked like for you.
Thank you. And I feel very blessed because out of every situation, opportunity, silver lining. But when I did go out, I jumped out of a four-story window because I didn't want to get raped for a third time in my life. I found myself in a situation that I couldn't get out of the door, and the window was the only choice. I didn't realize how high up I was, but once you kind of go that way, there's no going back. I ended up getting dropped. So with that miracle of surviving that and not having any broken bones and just a really screwed up back. My chiropractor, I went to a chiropractor and his treatments were wonderful and he recommended yoga. And again, being very fortunate, the very first place I went to for yoga, I had the most wonderful teacher, or the right teacher for me, I should say. But her class was full of students, so I'm not the only one with that opinion. And I can say it's because it's still going on now. This was over 30 years ago. It's the St. Mark's Yoga Center at the St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Washington, D.C., kind of in the Capitol Hill area. You could Google it because I know during the pandemic, I took some classes with them because, like everyone else, they shifted online.
Mm.
And that was Shivananda Yoga, my first introduction. And the teacher, I cannot remember her name. I can picture her in her practice. She included, I found out that she always does this because this was my first class. I'm going for the movement because the doctor says for my back, find this class is walking distance in this church, $50 a month pass, unlimited. This is 30 years ago. Great deal, right? This was a great deal. I said, great, this is walking distance. I can go as often as I can. First class. So after, we're doing the movement, what I expect yoga to be, because I didn't really know. And then in the end, she has us lie down and she does this guided rest, this meditation where I tell you, Ashley, I had an outer body experience. I've had two outer body experiences in my life. And by that, I mean, I could see myself on the yoga mat. I could see the classroom like a bird's eye view, drone's eye view, we would say now. And that was peaceful. And then I can't remember anything else other than feeling out of my body, weightlessness and peace. And then hearing her bringing us back into the room, like wiggle your fingers or toes or whatever cue she was using. In my mind saying, no, no, I don't want to come back. And that just being such a wonderful experience and being refreshed and thinking, okay, I have this lady. I found my person and went, even did a retreat with her. And it wasn't until fast forward to the pandemic when I ended up becoming a yoga teacher. I don't want to tell too many stories and learned that that experience was part of yoga nidra, which is a meditative sleep, which has been clinically and scientifically proven to help veterans and first responders with PTS get rest. That was the first time I realized I have been walking around in a heightened state of, as you say, fight or flight, stress. This was just weeks and months after that traumatic experience. And that was the first time I had rested, really rested, and had that. And people with brain traumatic injuries or missing limbs or other experiences from like I had, it's hard to rest or get sleep. And yoga nidra has been proven that maybe even a 60-minute class can be the equivalent of 4 hours of sleep or genuine rest. So I left that 1 hour class with that 15 minutes of yoga nidra, a different person. And not to exaggerate, but like a weight was just lifted. And then not only was it good for my back, but my mind and just all that stuff you're holding on to when you're going through trauma that you don't realize because you're just trying to process the daily. How do I function daily without crying or being normal and showing up? So once I realized that yoga nidra, I went on to get another certification in that because I do work with Veterans Yoga Project. And we have an even further teaching certification called Mindful Resilience because we want those tools and we are free for veterans, active duty, first responders, caregivers, and their families because actually, the work you do is heavy to say the least. I don't want to label it. It's important and it's heavy and it doesn't come without consequences. So those mindful resilience tools are perfect for somebody like me with PTS that went out of a 4-story window or who was a rape survivor, or it can apply in lots of other situations. It doesn't just have to be because I saw combat duty or I used my life-saving skills. It can be whatever your body decides was traumatic. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but it does need to be dealt with. And I went for a long time. Okay, I had the yoga, didn't know the yoga nidra was helping me up here. Knew it felt great, knew the teacher was great, knew it was great for my back because it was always at least 45 minutes of that. And then it wasn't years again until I had a major grief incident that triggered a response that I couldn't handle, that I thought was beyond the normal grief response, I should say. So when I say I couldn't handle it, pulling hair out, I still had to take 2 doctor's visits and prescriptions and, you know, poor sleep and beyond poor eating, me not being able to function in that way. I had grieved before, but losing daddy was like that. Lost grandparents before, had divorces before, I had losses before, job losses, moves. But something about losing daddy for our family was devastating. So that's when I threw myself instinctively back into yoga and the yoga nidra and everything that you learn about the nervous system. So yes, yoga nidra takes your nervous system, takes you out of flight and fight to rest and digest, where we're supposed to be 90% of the time. Where we're supposed to be 90, I say 90%, but think of it. In our modern society, we are not running from things in an, I don't even want to say in an ideal situation. Okay, you get up. If your alarm clock goes off on time and you've planned it, you don't have to rush for your shower, your breakfast. If you want to do your breathing exercises, your journal, get your kids ready, plan that. You need an hour and a half, you need 15 minutes for yourself, that's planned. Okay, the alarm doesn't go off, or you wake up 6, okay, you're going to be a little bit more stressed. That's fine. But, yoga nidra and yoga and other mindful resilience tools teach you, hey, take your breath work. Maybe change what you're going to have for dinner, breakfast. Maybe you don't get to journal in the morning. You're going to do that at lunch instead. You can adjust, stay within your regular stress, you know, and keep going. But if you don't plan properly or you stay on social media or what can I say? External things can happen that just get us going. We're constantly in hype. I no longer watch the news as I used to. I get a news digest. I no longer do social media for my friends and family to keep up what's going on like I used to. Twice a week is good for that. I can use social media for my business. Schedule that. You can use a scheduler. I don't even have to see what's going on. Put that out, but I don't have to go on every day and see. I don't do notifications anymore. Once I figured out you can turn off notifications or
It's
only get
amazing.
notifications or only get certain notifications that you want, that just takes your stress level down. So we've been conditioned to spend so much time in stress. I gotta react. I gotta answer now. Microwave meals, this, that, and the other. I love a slow cooker. Put it in. It's done at the end of the day. Ooh, that's so. We can And I used to be like that, goal in oriented. What's going on? My to-do list. Da-da-da-da-da-da. I still thrive on that. I still have goals, but different. And now I thrive on taking things off and taking commitments off and renegotiating. Now that gets me more excited than how much can I get done. I get sucked in and have gotten sucked in to how society gamifies everything. Even when I register for yoga classes with the service I use, you know, if you share this, you get extra 10 points, and I'm on the top of the leaderboard. I'm on the top of the leaderboard for what? I thought about the other day because I used to do it. I used to love it, and I used to love seeing myself. Oh, yeah, I'm 20,000 points. I'm like, for what?
Hmm.
Another thing I used to get into, and then I feel bad. Goodreads. I love to read. If I'm not making my Goodreads, pledge for the year, those last 2 months they send you, you're 5 books down. That's not fun anymore.
No.
It's not fun anymore. So a lot of the stressors that society will have us build into, fine. I love them. I like that, but now I readjust my Goodreads, or if that two thing comes in 2 months, I say, you know what? I'm going to adjust it and see if I can read two more books in 2 months instead of five. And who cares? It's my goal. I can adjust it. And then I still feel good. I made a goal. I'm still in it. There's so many different ways to look at it because I know society can be competitive and the stressors can be on it. So once I learned that once I eliminate a lot of that, then I'm really in tune. My nervous system is really in tune for what I really need to be looking out for or in tune for. And I respond instead of react. You know,
Hmm.
instead it's like 'cause that's one thing I think social media has us trained to react, react, react. And they tell us that react. Hey, happy face, snowy face, cry, react. They want you to read and react. React. They give you 5 different ways to react. I don't know if they ever did the don't like button yet. Maybe they did. But you can like, you can love, you can care, you can cry, you can wow, you can, you know, all these kind of reactions. So they want us to react all the time. And we're not designed to react. We're designed to just be. And because we're trained to react, when we rest, we feel guilty. And we think what we're supposed to be doing something. And you as a first responder, know this, you're trained to react immediately. When that call comes in and that signal, when you're somebody and someone's choking or whatever, you're in the military, doesn't matter if you're active duty out in the field, thought you were having a night off just at the movies and somebody, whenever, you immediately respond. So you instinctively know when you really, really need to. So I think we can equally train ourselves to react and not respond because we really, really know when we need to react. And if I'm sorry, when we need to respond and when we're reacting all the time, I think in my case, I missed some signals. Not the signals that kept me from getting physically assaulted, but some signals like I really should have said no to doing that, or no, I really should have said, no, I don't want to go to that party. And it could even just be something like that. You don't want to
Hmm.
let your friend down. You feel like you'll be so disappointed if you don't come. Or even if you wake up and I don't feel good today. If I do this, I'm not going to show up 100%. And what's worse, if I tell them now or if I show up and let them down? It's gonna be bad either way. At least honor me, and if I do that properly, they'll respect that. It'll come through respectfully. And I say that, Ashley, because I know I had to cancel with you a couple times before we talked, and it was
Oh
because I
my
really
God.
didn't feel well. It really didn't feel well. And I think that I know sometimes I push through doing things and I look back and I regret it or the result was mediocre. So that's where training my nervous system and how to do like, and I love that you say nervous system in your audience, but sometimes when I say nervous system, what does that even mean? And we always knew, at least I always knew as a child, I don't, your grandmother, calm down now, that's bad for your nerves. Or your mother say, you're getting on my nerves, you're upsetting me. Or, you can hear it said, if I look back and I look at the women in my life that, modeled such much for me, they were careless, care. I don't want to say careless, selfless,
Mhm.
selfless. I
Mhm.
They modeled in ways that I don't want to model. I think they gave so much of themselves to the families that I'm like, okay, I want to be a little bit more 21st century. They're a little bit more old fashioned, like totally selfless, gave everything. But at the same time, I could see they had theirs was prayer, meditation, same thing to me. It's a form of meditation. So for me to be able to incorporate meditation into my mindfulness kit was an easy thing. I'm like, oh, this is something I've seen modeled. It's something I know that I do. I can do privately in a quiet place. I know I can do it with my eyes closed. I know I can say it out loud. I know I can have it in my head, right? I know I can listen to somebody else. All of that was familiar. And then, and then the music. My parents were musicians. So music is comforting. When my mother was upset, music was soothing for her. When my father died, I thought she was going to break the piano playing Claire de Lune. It was so beautiful, and powerful, so that's music. And I use music in my mindfulness when I lead a meditation. I don't use the music myself because I don't know what's going to trigger other people. But when I do it online, I say, you're in your space. If you have your music, put your music on, or here's a playlist. If you're interested and want to check something out,
Mhm.
here's a playlist that you can do. I don't have it with me, but I bought a tuning fork. I was talking
Mm.
with a colleague, and I got yeah, and it really resonated with me because as I say, my parents were musicians, and there's a different frequencies can make you feel different things. So I got one. I can't remember the hertz, but it says like feel good. You can Google it, and it does feel good, and it also just makes me feel connected to my parents. So I can just
Mm.
do that. That's mindfulness for me. That's meditation. That can be something, walking. We know the health benefits of walking, but I encourage people to do walking meditations. People are like, oh, I walk my dog every day. I'm like, okay, great. So the next time, look for blue things. How many blue things did you see? Or look for how many new bulbs. Spring now, new things coming up. And they're like, that was fun. I didn't realize it. You can always take your consciousness to a different level because you're right, you walk your dog, maybe you have the same route. You're tuning out. You may be
Mhm.
listening to music, you got your podcast. Maybe that's working for you. You can still even elevate it one day out of that week. Okay, podcast free. I'm going to take it more mindfulness. What can I look for today? Insects on the street. Again, like I say, you said bee activities happening in your area. Look for
Mhm.
insect activity. There's so many things we can do that put us in that rest and relax and back to how we're supposed to be. We're not supposed to be sitting down hunched over computers and devices. I love my devices. I love living in an interconnected world, but that's not how I try to tell, make sure, and I'm worse, I don't want to be hunched back, like have it up, for my posture. And even just having good posture puts us back in a restful position. Because it's aligning up with our body. Our vagus nerve runs through their poses and breathing exercises. We can do this. Stimulate the vagus nerve, which stimulates the rest and relax response in our body. Because if you're breathing a certain way or in a position that triggers your vagus nerve in a certain way, the brain figures you're safe. You're safe, and it responds as if you're safe. And if you think about it, the next time you're upset or frightened, notice what's happening with your breath, your body, what's physically happening to you. And the brain is getting all of those signals. And it's like, okay, are we running? Are we fighting? What's happening? All that's pumping up to help you to save your life. To save your life, just if you were step off the curb and not paying attention and somebody honks a horn, boom, you may be frozen even,
Mhm.
sometimes because you get that, you may be able to but you'll get that instant reaction because you're immediately alarmed. So when you're breathing a certain way, you immediately send that signal, it's okay, I'm relaxed. And if you continue in that restful or relaxing pose, with that breathing exercise. That's why 10 minutes, sorry, 10 seconds, 15 seconds of breathing exercise can take you from what on the ceiling, right? To like chilling in your beanbag, kind of
Mhm.
position to, just like somebody sneaks up on you and does something. You're like, oh, I know, I was just, people get you and you're like, immediately you're calm again. It can happen like that with 10 seconds or one round of a breathing exercise. So the more you do that, that's what happened to me in that yoga nidra. I was already had been working through my first yoga class. She had already started us off with breath work. We were doing meditation. I had doing movement. My body was warmed up and relaxed. I was really receptive to when she had us lay down and incorporate everything. And she put us, boom, my body hopped on it. It said, yes, I'm safe. This is safe. I'm safe. And it ran with it. So
Wow.
regularly doing that for yourself. It's the nicest thing you can do. One of the nicest things that you can do for yourself and even if it's a time where you're there and it's maybe 15 minutes and you're struggling and you're like, I can't get any peace or whatever, that's okay.
Mhm.
Because it's 15 minutes and you sat there with it or you lied there with it and you're like, that's okay. And you breathe and it's okay. Because the
Mhm.
first time you can do it could be the worst time. It can be very hard to be still. It can be very hard to even do a breathing exercise for 10 seconds. I understand that because it can be very hard to even breathe.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
understand that. I know it could be very hard to even think that it makes sense that this would even work, that it could sound too simple. It's something for me because I use it to manage my grief because now I'm officially an adult organ.
I was like, I can't wait for you to explain that one.
Orphan. I'm an officially an adult orphan. Yeah, I like to say when Daddy died in 2021, in May 2021, he made me a yoga teacher. It was after that that I really turned back to yoga to manage grief and ended up becoming a yoga teacher. So I know it works for managing grief, and grief can feel as devastating as anything that you have to deal with, where it can just feel as if you want to die too. Depending on the loss. The loss of a loved one can make you feel as if you want to die too. The loss of a situation can make it feel as if you want to die because you can't imagine your life without that situation. So when I say yoga pulled me back from the brink of grief, it wasn't like the first day. This was weeks and months, and it's still a daily practice because I still am grieving. Now I'm mommy died, so fast forward 2 years later, three, mommy died, parents don't live forever. So, you're still dealing with the first grief and all the changes, and then you have that. So if I didn't have a robust mindfulness practice, I don't know what I would do. That's
Mhm.
just dealing with my grief.
Mhm.
Then you got life, your own life, my own personal family, the circumstances in the world, and then, your own personal dreams and things. You know what so I know that it takes consistency, is what I want to say. And it's not a quick fix. It's not going to be fixed for me, the first time when I got that wonderful response with yoga nidra, I consider myself very, very lucky. But I also consider it not so much luck, but listening to being receptive to trying new things, I want to say, because I was in so much pain for my back. And in that situation, chiropractic, before I never really thought much about chiropractors, but after that, I'm a chiropractor, right? They work on backs. Like I went to the regular doctor, the doctor said, yeah, chiropractor. Because before, respect, you're like, are they real doctors? I didn't know because I didn't know. So I went there like, oh yeah, I'll go to and I don't know if I got a recommendation, but I did find one that I loved, and he said yoga. So I was be open to finding solutions to problems, and I don't want to use the word problem because grief's not a problem. PTS is not a problem. I would recommend people be receptive to trying different solutions to pain points or things you're having trouble managing yourself. And I could not manage my grief on my own. I had prayer, I had family, but then you're in that dynamic when you want to be strong for your mother and sister. I had friends. It's weird leaning on friends. Friends don't always have to know. Trust me, my friends were there. It wasn't as if I felt abandoned by friends or anything. But it's weird how much you want to. It's just hard.
Mhm.
Some groups, I didn't turn any stone unturned, different groups, prayer group, everything. So I think that being receptive to trying different things is why I can handle the daily. So I think I want to say with a bit of humor.
Mhm.
and hopefully grace.
Yeah, I love I mean, you gave us so much good information, but I think the biggest takeaways too that I love that you spoke to that I talk about a lot and remind myself of as well is that the nervous system requires consistency. It requires a practice, and it requires us to look at what we thought was normal functioning or just surviving throughout the day is not really the the ultimate way of living life, and it comes with a price tag. So I'm glad that you talked about grace and consistency and not expecting an overnight Amazon delivery type experience because so many of us, and myself included, look for that overnight. Like we want to feel better now. We don't want to feel better in months. And but being okay with where you are now and knowing that it is a journey, that's a really powerful message to share. And I'm glad that you spoke to that specifically because we're in that like immediate result type culture that this is not your nervous system didn't pick up all this primal wiring overnight. These were messages developed over time. And so you have to be willing to give it that same care and attention and patience as you move into a new network and a new way of living. So thank you for saying all of that.
You're welcome. And I love overnight delivery too. So um, it was hard.
It's way too
It was hard.
convenient.
I love major convenience. But actually, here's the good thing about having a robust mindfulness practice. It's super convenient. It's in your back pocket. It's in your front pocket. It's with you all the time. No, dialing it up or having to pull it up at all. I teach easy skills. Once you learn a couple of breathwork exercises, can I show you a couple? Once you
Yeah,
learn a
absolutely.
couple, yeah, they're yours forever. So this is a good thing. So I'm going to show two, I'm going to do two. And here's the good thing, triangle breath. Please Google or look on YouTube. I've seen such cool diagram videos. I'm not that clever about it, but just think of a triangle. It has three equal parts, right? The sides and the base. The inhale is going to be one side, the hold is one side, the exhale is one side. I love triangle breath because you can do this in a meeting. Okay, here's my hand. Say this is on my lap. I'm in triangle breath. I can draw my triangle while I'm in this meeting. I'm looking at you. You don't know I'm inhaling, exhaling. I'm not making a big deal. My hand is on my lap. But I have that
Mhm.
sensation, that physical. I can say, okay, inhale for 3, hold for 3, exhale for 3. That's in a meeting. It's a stressful meeting. Meetings can get stressful, whether it's in the boardroom, the classroom, the kitchen table. Conversations can be stressful. You don't want to be the one making a big deal. You don't want to be that dramatic.
Yeah.
Right? You don't wanna be that dramatic. You're not the athlete on the free throw line or the elite one that's serving. That's fine for that big, and I love how they model that for us. I love how elite athletes model that for us. They're about to do something very important, all eyes on them, crucial. They've done this 1,000 times. It's mental. They breathe. Inhale, exhale. They take the free throw shot. You don't wanna be that performative. So you can just do that privately. You can close your eyes and you can visualize doing that triangle. So I'm going to just tap it out. So inhale, hold, exhale. Now let's repeat it. So you're inhaling for your own count of 3. I don't want to do the timing because what if you need a big inhale and your lung capacity is different. But the idea is just like a triangle, there's 3 equal parts. So you inhale for your count of 3, hold it for equal, and then exhale. If I take a particularly long inhale, I sigh it out through my mouth.
Mhm.
That just gives me extra satisfaction. And if it's a
Yeah.
really big, just like, and if you notice that, that's something natural that our body likes to do. Sometimes you've done something, sense of accomplishment, you come and you just sit down, your shoulders automatically come down, everything kind of just sinks in, you let go to gravity, you feel supported. So you can do that for yourself. I say triangle breath because if you visualize that gives you structure, but just the same, just a deep inhale.
Mm.
That'll take you down a notch in the grocery store line. That's when people don't mind. And you know what? That's one I don't really mind doing in public because it's kind of contagious. You're in the grocery store line or something, people in the bank line, people are kind of fidgety. You go, people kind of, they kind of do it too. They're like, "Yeah, yeah." You kind of make a little community. It's better than people like being grumbly because people pick up on that too. You start complaining, people kind of, yeah, what's taking so long? But if you do people kind of do the stretch, the little exhale with you. So sometimes you kind of want to be the leader and demonstrate, look, we're in this line together. Let's just, the other people calm down. And then sometimes you don't want other people to know I'm freaking out, but look, I got this. I can do mine. Nobody knows I'm doing a breathing exercise. And look, I'm right back to cool as a cucumber. And once you have those skills, do it before you answer your husband. Trust me, I have to practice what I preach. What did you say, sweetie? And then take that inhale, exhale. Because you know you heard what he said. And you know you don't want to say what you were going to say. Maybe. This can be any conversation, right? Any conversation. Inhale, exhale, and then come back with that response instead of that reaction. We want to
Yes.
respond instead of react.
Yeah, and
Because we
they
want
what
to Ashley, I want to ask you a question because I want to rely on my nervous system to react when I need it. Like when you were a first responder, as I say, your nervous system was respond to react right away, regardless of what else was going on. If you didn't feel well, if you were in deep conversation, whatever. So I can't be reacting to everything, right? So I need to be able to that I'm calm. Was this something that you had to learn, or is that part of your training?
Yeah, not part of your training. I think this is one thing I talk to people a lot about how to have a healthy career while you're still online or still serving is that knowing when you need to be in that heightened state and when you don't. And that requires like intentional effort and practice. And you can't just kind of show up. Like when people, you see this a lot when people are on shift or at work and then they go home and they still feel the same way or they're treating their family in an emergency state response or so your nervous system doesn't know time, place, and event. It only knows what's going on. So you have to be able to create those distinctions of here's my role, here's my nervous system role in this element, and now how do I re-regulate and come back into parasympathetic nervous system at home so that you're not just constantly in that heightened state all of the time because you that only lasts for so long and man it has a profound impact on you if you continue to live that way.
It does, and I know there's nobody that's gonna be able to tell me differently, but one reason I had arthritis because I was in a heightened state of stress all the time, and that was rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disorder, and I know that's why I had it. I have some
Mhm.
residual joint damage that's never I had it for about 18 years, I had to take oral chemotherapy, but I know that's what it was. As you say, profound effect, that's the price I paid for it. It can come in different ways. It's usually some type of health price, and that was mine, and I consider that pretty severe enough. Don't wanna live it's not about having regrets, but one reason I talk about being a sexual assault survivor, so that if and I'm so glad you asked me if somebody wanted a message, it's not your fault. Because if I can get that through and break through that, and then you can start doing the work to get out of fight and flight because you're walking around like on eggshells all the time after, an assault, physical or sexual, I would imagine, So as soon as you can start getting that work, the better off you'll be and the less what's it called? Side effects like, the yeah, rheumatoid arthritis is a side effect of sexual assault for me because I didn't process it
Yeah.
all I needed to process. You know what I'm
Yeah,
trying to
all
say.
so much of that stuff, that illness is psychosomatic illness. And chronic stress causes chronic inflammation, and that's where a lot of those autoimmunes come from. So I deal with psoriasis is my thing that I deal with. So I know
Mhm.
when I'm in a heightened state of stress, I'll get flare ups. And the craziest thing is too is like our body is so good and our nervous system is really so good at giving us those warning signs before the physical signs show up, but we're like I don't need to listen. Or we just keep grinding, keep doing, and then the body's like, okay, well, here's like stiff joints or painful joints, or here's like a flare up on your skin or something like that. Is like, we just don't listen. And because we, like you mentioned earlier, we don't slow down and like quiet down enough to hear that. Like, it's just that constant noise and the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And then we're perplexed at why we see these things show up in us, these health issues, but it's like, it actually makes perfect sense. All right, so as we come to the close of our episode today, any last words of wisdom that you want to offer to our folks listening today, or anything that you want to make sure they walk away with?
Yes, I think, well, first of all, thank you so much for joining my story, listening to my story. I understand why you come hang out with Ashley. I just love her. So thanks for tuning in and hanging out with me today too, and for listening to my story. And my final word is words are of encouragement. Ashley mentioned consistency. I'm going to remind you about patience. Ashley mentioned forgiveness. And I'm going to remind you that you're worth it. So just put it all together.
That's so good. What a good message to end it with. I love it. And I couldn't agree more. Well, again, this has been such a fun conversation, and so happy that we can get this message out there, and excited to hear from others about how they start implementing in mindfulness into their life, whether it is just walking or yoga, which is just like it's so beneficial in so many ways. Quieting down and giving yourself space. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, please, today. And if you found this conversation valuable, which I know you will, is please share this with some other folks. Even little bits of information can be so helpful. So like and share, and just get the word out there. So as always, we appreciate you so much and your support, and we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Sit Around the Fire.